Hello, welcome to CubsPS Plus, the Northside Numbers Game, a weekly podcast that dives headfirst into the analysis of hot topics driving Chicago Cubs baseball. I'm your host, Mike Waller, a lifelong Cub fan, full-time baseball stat nerd, and sometime youth baseball coach. CubsPS Plus is part of the Bleacher Bunch Productions on the Fans First Sports Network, joining great shows like The Ranto Show, Cup of Cubby Blue, and Baseball Rabbit Hole. The Bleacher Bunch feed is available wherever it is you get your podcasts, and CubsPS Plus is always available ad-free to Patreon supporters at patreon.com/CubsPS Plus, where you can support the show and always find a variety of benefits starting as low as $1 a month. In addition to the podcast feeds, you can also find me on Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube, all at CubsPS Plus. A spin on the baseball metric, OPS Plus. Love the pod or hate it? Please drop a review wherever it is you find your podcasts. If you've done that, thank you so much. Maybe you can share an episode with a friend. It's June 24th, 2024. The Cubs are 37-41, and the slog of bad baseball moves to San Francisco. I have a great guest tonight, and Ryne Sandberg has a statue. Are you ready? I'm ready. Here we go. Welcome into episode 79. No Cub has ever worn number 79, and one of our main topics tonight is Christopher Morel, who was a 79th percentile barrel rate among qualified hitters. So between talking about Morel and talking about advanced stats, let's do this. I'm thrilled to be joined by Michael Cotton, co-host of the Ranto Show and host-producer of Baseball Rabbit Hole, and now a two-time guest. Welcome back.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
I feel a little awkward. We seem to have worn the same hat.
We seem to. Well, when I filled in for you last time, I wore the Rancher hat, and then Danny wore CubsPS Plus. So I was going to wear no hat, and I saw you wearing it, so I figured I better rep the brand too. But
yeah.
Good to have you back.
Now, is this on video at all, or
yes, it's going to go up.
I
to
honestly
YouTube.
don't. Okay, see, I am a podcast only guy.
So
I never watch YouTube for really anything, as you well know, because I didn't realize I could watch Game 6 of 2016 NLCS there. But
yeah, so this will go up on YouTube.
Always listen.
I don't do a lot on YouTube, but I put all my episodes out there, and I have a few very dedicated followers there. So shout out to a couple of users who drop in comments here and there.
Yeah, shout out to all those people who are unfortunately having to look at me tonight.
Same. Yeah, for the longest time, it was just an audiogram, so nobody even had to look at me, but here we are. But no, it's good to have you here. I think we have quite a bit to talk about. I think this is going to be interesting to evolve as we talk about some of the advanced metrics and stuff, because I think, I don't know, we tend to go at each other a little bit in the Discord. I think we're actually maybe closer than some people may think. But to start, the Cubs just had a pretty mediocre homestand. Don't really need to get into all that, but I did want to talk a little bit about Sunday. I had originally hoped to be in town, but it just didn't work out for us. Ryne Sandberg getting a statue. And I know I started picking up on WGN in like 1982. It happened to be Rhino's rookie year. Kind of followed him through. By the time I was 10 and he won the MVP, I mean, that locked me in basically to Cubs torture for the rest of my life, and he became my guy forever. I think you're a couple years younger than me, but I think you're probably very similar time frame.
Yeah, definitely. 83 was probably like the earliest I remember seeing any Cubs games. And then, of course, 1984 was the season for most of us getting into the team of people that are around our age. I was 8. It's like the perfect time. Like whoever you, and I've come to realize this, like whoever you decide that you want to root for and who you really like when you're like 8, 9, 10 years old, like you end up kind of locked into them for the rest of your life, whether you want to or not. Like you may ultimately change for certain reasons. Like maybe you go to a different school than the college that you liked, but you still always have that soft spot for the team that you loved when you were a kid.
And I think even players too. I found, so I grew up a Hawkeye, I grew up a Cub. And I think back to like Hawkeye football, same age, like Iowa had a couple Rose Bowl teams in that era. And there were some guys I absolutely love. And then there were some players who in the last like 20 years, when I've been a fully vaguely functioning adult, that I've really liked almost on the same level, which tells me probably how good that player really is to kind of eclipse, maybe that kid I loved when I was 12. But Rhino's been the one to stick. He's always been my favorite. I remember one of my favorite stories, my best friend and I both idolized Ryno and would watch the Cubs all the time and always try to beat him on the playground and copy his batting stance and all the things. And I don't know, we were like 13, 14, and all of a sudden we basically just looked at each other and said, when he gets elected to the Hall of Fame, we're going to go for the induction. And sort of thought it was a joke. Like at that point, he was on a good career trajectory, but he wasn't locked in Hall of Famer yet at that point by any stretch. And then when the announcement happened, I was thinking about it and I was like, yeah, damn, we should go. And so I called him up and we went. And it was one of the best weekends of my life. It's a really weird, awkward time to be in Cooperstown, but it was cool to go for that reason.
Oh, that's amazing. Like, I mean, just to have that sort of thought when you're like 14 years old, you know, for a player, you know, and just say, oh, we're going to go to the Hall of Fame when this guy makes it. Like, that's amazing. And then to be able to actually do it, what, that must have been 20-ish years later, something like that?
Probably a little, probably certainly 18, 20, yeah.
Maybe not quite, yeah.
Yeah. And it was one of those where it wasn't necessarily an easy flight for either of us. Like, he was still living in Iowa. I was in Oklahoma City, so Cooperstown's not the easiest place in the world to get to, but we figured it out. And, that'll definitely be a memory I hold on to forever.
Yeah,
and,
well,
go ahead.
I talked about that Hall of Fame induction speech today.
Yes.
That was in the midst of the steroid scandals. The performance-enhancing drugs were everywhere at the time.
And that was right around, I think that might have been the season, it was 2005, but I think that was the season where they did the anonymous testing where we're just going to test everybody and no names are going to come out. And then all of a sudden all the names were coming out.
Yeah, it was that congressional report, whatever that was called, named after some senator that I don't care about. But, you know, and so it was in the zeitgeist. It was everywhere. And Ryno made a very impassioned and thoughtful speech up there all about, and he called it respect, you know, like respected the game and did do it. But, I mean, it was really easy to read between the lines that he was annoyed with how everybody had been doing performance-enhancing drugs, and it was clearly obvious for many of the guys of the era, you know, that they were hitting home runs or pitching or whatever. Like, they were just monsters at the time. And it was, you know, Ryno, every time I've ever heard him speak, he seems to be very thoughtful, and he puts his words together very well. I think on Sunday he did that a little bit there as well. Not quite so much, but I think that's mainly because the cancer, I don't want to call it a cancer scare because he still has it. It's just something he's going to have to live with the rest of his life.
Yep.
Like, that cancer thing really, first, it took away all of his time to think about what he was going to say.
Right.
And then also, you know, probably changed the perspective that he might have had going into it to where he was no longer really thinking about baseball and more thinking about his life and the friends. And I listened to the recap podcast, and he talked a lot about how all these people sort of came out of the woodwork to, you know, reach out to him when he was ill and help out as much as they could. And, you know, so a much different perspective, but he did get a few jabs in there. He definitely did.
He has this rep of being, you know, as a player, he was always pretty soft-spoken. He wouldn't say a lot in the press after games, but you're right. When he does speak, he's kind of sneaky about it. And he's really good at kind of sneaking those bits in there when he feels it's important and needs to. And I think you could see, you know, he said all the guys you mentioned. I mean, that recap podcast was fantastic with Kaplan. But seeing the way all those guys turned out for him, you knew some of the guys were going to come back, and we're celebrating the 1984 team, which was really special. But I think a lot of those guys were genuinely there for Ryno and was the kind of teammate you want to come back for. And that's the kind of team they had that year. And it was also cool to see the current players go up on the walkway above to watch the ceremony, which I don't know exactly the timing of it, but it's somewhere in their pregame routine. And those guys are pretty locked into their routine. So it was cool that they came out and watched that.
Yeah, they kind of made I don't know. ESPN had this game, kind of messed it all up, in my opinion.
That pissed me off.
Lots of people had big plans to be there, like you, and it was a day game. And like for me, if I had had tickets to this game, it would have thrown me out because I can go up there and I can be back on a Sunday.
Yep.
And go to work on Monday, no problem. But when you shift it to a night game, I can no longer do that. And I'm sure that happened to a lot of people.
There were some people that
really
commented in
made
Discord.
a big deal about. Yeah, they kind of made a big deal about Craig Counsell getting the guys out there. I don't know how much persuasion.
Nah, I'm sure they mostly wanted to be there
required.
anyway. It's still just good to see it though. But
no, it was cool to see them all up there and watching and. Because and that is a little bit different than what they've done with some of the other ones, and I think partially due to where it was held.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they had the Gallagher Way Park.
They did not
with the outdoor sort of bridge area.
Right.
Like the Gallagher Way may have been there for the Fergie statue, but I don't know if the outdoor area was there. Where they could actually not leave the stadium, but still watch.
But it was so cool, and it was just disappointing to see. Honestly, with the games played yesterday, I don't even know why ESPN wanted that game over some of their other choices. But it was really kind of crappy that they came in and just stepped over something the Cubs were trying to do for one of their all-time greats that had been planned out for a while. I mean, just let that be a Cub thing and do that. And they focused on it a decent amount, but we were going to get Boog either way, probably. Well, I guess Boog would have been gone. Maybe we wouldn't have gotten him. Maybe we would have gotten Pat on the TV side.
That's what I was hoping.
But I don't know. It just probably should have been a different way. I wish they'd have done it in the afternoon. Play Rhino's favorite day baseball. What'd you think of the statue? I actually kind of liked it.
Oh yeah. I think all those statues are great. I really do. There really has not been a miss yet. The only thing I would say about Rhino's statue is maybe he's a little buffer.
Yeah,
than he was. I don't quite remember him looking that ripped, but you know.
Hey, well, one thing I did like, a couple people said it kind of messed with his face and made it look weird, but I love that they got the flip down shades because he always had those things on.
Oh yeah, yep. And he made a big deal about it being a defensive pose.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, I mean, it was the Ryne Sandberg game, right? That was the 40th anniversary. They easily could have, taken a picture of him hitting one of those home runs and used that.
And it would have been absolutely classic if they had, but.
Oh, absolutely. But they asked him what he wanted. And he was really into his defense and how well he played that. And it works out in his stats, I think he had one of the highest rated defensive, back how it was done back then. Like he was one of the best defensive second basemen of all time when he ended his career. And, but like you said, you could have easily done the hitting because when he retired, he had the most home runs of any second baseman that had ever played the game.
And he was distinct either way.
Both.
His batting stance was pretty distinct too, the way he would get his arms out on that swing. And before any coach even taught be creeping in on the ground ball, just watching him, I see that pose he's in up on his toes, kind of sneaking in as the pitch is thrown. And that's definitely one of the ways I've always pictured Rhino.
Well, and he gave a lot of credit to Larry Boa for that. They came over from the Phillies together. Famously, Ryne Sandberg, Hall of Famer Ryne Sandberg, was the throw-in on the Larry Boa trade in order to get that done. And so he comes over, becomes a Hall of Famer. It's amazing. But Larry Boa took him under his wing and was like, this is how you have to prepare. And and it might have been something as simple as like, I mean, granted, Larry Bowa was the veteran at the time, and he was sort of looking out for his guy because they both came over from the Phillies, and back then it was a lot different environment, right? Like he wouldn't have necessarily had a real relationship with anybody on another team.
No.
I mean, there was no social media. There was no phones. They didn't get together. They couldn't have a lot of the interactions that they might in this era. Back then, you were on a team and those are the only people you know. So, if they both go to Chicago, he might be the only guy that he's really comfortable with. Like, hey, I really want to do my normal routine. This is how I get ready. This is what I do. Kid, you're with me. You're the guy I know. Come out here and do it. And like, it could have been as simple as that for Larry Bowa, but like what Ryno took from that, like he took a lot from it. He copied it. He continued to do it after Larry Bowa was gone. He prepared that way. Like you said, he prepared that way for his entire career with just slight adjustments when he learned something new to do, Yep. But yeah, so it was pretty cool. It's one of those things that, maybe Larry Bowa didn't think a ton of it at the moment, and it set Ryne Sandberg on a course for the Hall of Fame to be the best defensive fielder he could possibly be.
Well, and I think Ryno's that guy, just to hear him talk and hear what other people have said about him. I think he's just that sponge. And I think he probably, Larry Bowa is obviously the leader type, has managed for years, and I think wanted to help. But Ryno was also willing to just be there and listen and soak it all in and try it. And clearly, that paid off for him. And there's guys today that do that, and then there are guys today that don't. And I think there's always kind of that mix and blend. And I think it may have been the perfect storm for Ryno because Dallas Green was the GM at the time. And a couple of the guys the Cubs already had, like Dick Ruthven was a starting pitcher. They had, I think, Rich Bordy in the bullpen. A bunch of those guys had been Phillies previously where Green came over from. And then famously, like right at the end of spring training, they make that trade to bring in the Sarge and Bobby Dernier from the Phillies. And all of a sudden it's like, I don't know, they just had those guys and they had that relationship, and that kind of set the season going. I still love hearing Bobby Dernier talk about hitting in front of Ryno.
Yeah, that's funny. I guess I wasn't. I didn't look that deep into it. I guess I didn't realize that Sarge and Dernier came over from the Phillies as well at the same time, or just before.
Yeah, Dallas Green basically came over and basically raided the Phillies because the Phillies were in the World Series in 83. They lost to Cal Ripken and the Orioles. And he was just raiding as much of Philly as he could.
Terrible in 83.
Yes, they were. But I think that year they were close. Like that was the year of the famous Lee Ely rant. And
yes,
he got fired not long after that. But he was even saying that like this team is too good to play like this. And which maybe is a transition into this team because I don't know how close this team necessarily is, but they're not playing like they should be playing. And make a few key switches, and all of a sudden, like a whole different ignition switch was on with Bobby Dernier at the top.
Yeah. You make a few changes. They brought in Jim Frey, right? That was his first year, and a little bit of new blood in there.
Picked up Sutcliffe
could have been
in
Counsell.
June.
Doesn't seem like it is going to be Counsell, but it could have been that way.
Yeah.
But managers had, I think, a lot more impact back then than they do now. But Jim Frey came in and had and he and Dallas Green, I think, obviously Dallas Green was bringing, like you said, a bunch of guys from the Phillies. He had a plan, and he gave Frey, who he thought were going to be good players, and Frey figured out how to put them together in the way that made them work the best.
Yep.
And I think when we're talking about this current Cubs team in 2024, 40 years later, we are seeing the effects of what happens when there is no plan or there's no clear voice at the top, and they seem to be reactionary to everything. I don't know. maybe you see it differently than me. Most people see baseball differently than me somehow. I don't know. I don't understand why I feel like I'm watching the same game as them until I talk to them. But then I see it, and it's like there never seems to be a plan. They seem to go out there and it's hit the ball hard and see what happens is about as much of a plan as they have. And then they just sort of react to the situation. Every team that comes in, they change all sorts of different things, move things around. And it's really frustrating to me as a person who thinks about these things and watches, like, that there doesn't seem to be a real cohesion to, like, this is the team that we are, and we're going to put this team out, and we're just going to beat you this way. You know, like, that's what the great teams have. But in basically any sport, they say, this is what we're going to do, and then they just get great at being that team and, you know, take on all comers. And the Cubs don't seem to want to do that at all. They're just like, let's change every 3 days because we have a new team coming in.
See, I would actually disagree with that. And I think they had a plan coming in. I think the plan has not worked especially well. And I'm actually frustrated that they don't seem to have a solid plan B. And some of it has been the injuries at times, but they're pretty healthy at the moment on offense anyway. The bullpen is not at all healthy. And what's frustrated me over the last few years is ever since they did the sell-off, they made the farm system better. That's awesome. Like, every source looking at that says it's better. So, I mean, players should be coming out of it. But there's been frustration at the big league level because I guess I was more or less okay with 2022 because they had to find out if Frank Schwindel was a guy and if Rafael Ortega was a guy. And they kind of ran those experiments in a year where they weren't going to win already, made their decisions, moved on from some guys. But like last year, instead of really committing to and finding out, like, what do we really have in Matt Mervis, it's Hosmer and Mancini until eventually they let Hosmer go and then Bellinger gets hurt, so he has to play first base. It's like, let's bring in a bunch of mediocre guys, which I sort of get they had to do before 2023 because they had so many holes to fill. But let's bring in this kind of mediocrity and not really find out what young players we have. And now they're at a point where there seems to be a lot of talent at Iowa. Those guys don't always hit when they come up, but that's also kind of baseball because not everybody hits when they come up to start. But it's like all these guys are there, and you've got Happ with a no-trade clause and Seiya with a no-trade clause. Not that they're bad. I mean, Happ's a perfectly good player, but they don't have A-level stars on this team. So if you want to juggle something up, there are only so many spots really to juggle. And I do like that they've given Christopher Morel run at third base, and we're going to talk about him quite a bit today. I like that they've let Michael Busch grow. I think they're starting to see some benefits from that. I think he started hot, went through a pretty prolonged slump, and I think he's battling back now. But if you want to bring up PCA, basically you needed Tauchman to get hurt. If you want to see Canario or Brennan Davis, somebody in the big league club basically has to be hurt. There's nowhere else to put him. And so I just don't get a sense for what plan B is. And to some extent, you're kind of screwed anyway, right? Because this team was built with Swanson and Happ and Seiya and Bellinger to be the guys. And other than Happ, like the last month, those guys mostly haven't hit.
Yeah, but every single guy you just mentioned has been injured.
True.
For one. But in where I disagree here is that you said that you don't think there's a plan B, or that you thought that the plan wasn't working. I actually personally think Craig Counsell came in with a plan this year, and I think it was working great. Best April. Now that's put some asterisks on there because the best April of all time is different when you start playing April 10th versus March 28th. But they had the best April of their history. And I think a lot of that had to do with Craig Counsell came in. He knew right away, this is what I want to do. And from the jump, that's how they started. But then once you start to hit the injuries, right? Even with the injuries, like the whole hope was that, they're still winning with the injuries, right? All the injuries are happening. They're still winning. We can be good. Because I think at that point, Craig Counsell was bringing up Canario to fill in for Hap that had the tweaked hamstring, and Saya, who had the oblique. And, you had him bringing the ability to bring guys up and play them. But then it starts, in my mind, on April 24th when Dansby Swanson hurts his knee and doesn't go to the IL for 12 days.
Yep.
He played for this team, and they lost the majority of those games. They had, yes. I think I looked it up before, they had 9 losses up to that point. Yep. And in the next 12 days, they had 7 losses. Sounds and those right. are all days that, and it may be off by a game or two, but those are all days that Dansby Swanson was trying to play on a bad knee. And this is a thing that has been a problem for years yes. in this organization, not letting guys go to the IL for some reason. And it's at that point that I wonder what happened, because why, like, unless Craig Counsell really didn't want to send him to the IL for some reason, he had it, then it's on him. But this was a problem before Craig Counsell came.
Yes.
And I feel like it's kind of at that point that they sort of took it out of his hands, and the issue started to snowball a little bit, because it was injury after injury after injury. And then you get Horner, who gets hurt, and they bring in Mastroboni. So they got Madrigal and Mastroboni as the middle of that infield. We've known from day one Madrigal should not have been on this team.
Yes.
There was no point to him at all. Mastroboni, I know you had a lot more optimism for him than most people.
But he was terrible. I mean, he was absolutely terrible.
He was, but he was used absolutely incorrectly. Like,
Agreed.
Everybody, it's so funny. Everybody talks about, like, oh, well, you don't want him to come up and, like, hurt his confidence. Well, they ruined Mastroboni's confidence at the beginning of the season by never letting him play until, like, the 8th inning in a tough situation. They're like, Mastroboni, go out there and pinch hit. It's like, yeah, that's not great for a guy,
right.
You know, especially a younger guy. But, like, now all of a sudden, you don't have Nico Horner going on the IL. Now, wait a second.
That was a full 8 or 9 games.
Yeah. And they never bring up Vasquez?
Vasquez. Yep. Luis Vasquez.
Yeah. They never bring up Vasquez, right? And I think, to me, bringing up Vasquez felt more like something Craig Counsell might have done.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if maybe he didn't get the opportunity to do that, because Craig Counsell doesn't mind playing youngsters.
Yeah.
Right? He'll put guys in there and let them play. But then Canario is in there at the time. He doesn't get the playing time.
Yep.
PCA. They send PCA down when they had a spot for him.
Yep.
But I think that might have been when Horner wouldn't go down. I don't know.
Yeah.
But this is what I'm talking about. I feel as if it's not so much that they didn't have a plan B. It's that Craig Counsell had plan A. And I have no proof of this, but it feels like when these injuries started happening, either he's really bad at managing that situation, or
which he never was in
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee.
To do the what?
Which he never was in Milwaukee. He was never bad at that in Milwaukee.
Right. But then all of a sudden, he couldn't make the moves that he wanted to make. And then right after that, that's when we start to see the left-handed pitcher. This is against Atlanta. a left-handed pitcher comes in, and they just wipe their whole lineup of lefties except for Bellinger, who may or may not have been injured at that point. I can't quite remember. But like, because Bellinger breaks a rib. How do you fracture a rib?
It's two of them.
And go 10 days and you're back.
Apparently they were small fractures. But.
No, look, when I was a kid, I got in a car accident and I just like got squeezed on my ribs. And my ribs hurt for months afterwards.
Yep.
Now, granted, I didn't have the technology that they have now or for professional baseball players, but I was also like 15 years old, and you rebound so quickly back then, and it was still months that would still pop up and hurt me. And that was just this like soft tissue strain of being squished between two people when we got in a wreck. And
oh, good, finish.
But then you got a 31-year-old guy out there who breaks a rib, and somehow he's available, and not only available, but right back in the lineup as number 3 hitter or whatever, getting as many at bats as possible.
Yeah, it drives me nuts. I can always live with you get the 3 days to backdate it. I'm okay. I get it if you got like Nico's questionable or Dansby's questionable, and they're one of your guys, and you just want to see, you don't want to lose them for 10. But if he can miss 2 games, maybe that's okay. I can live with that. I don't always love it, but because sometimes just give the guy 10 days off and let him come back. But what drives me nuts is they've already fallen in the same trap they were in all year last year. This is how they fried the entire bullpen. When every game is 1 and 2 runs at the 7th inning mark. Every game is close. Every game is close late. You're not scoring enough. You're putting pressure on your starting pitchers. And whether they intend to or not, and this is where I think to your point, I think Council was a lot more free in the first month of the season. One, they were playing well, so they were scoring more. The starting pitching was amazing. Even when the bullpen was blowing games, it was still somehow a little bit better. But you get in this trap, I think, of feeling like you have to manage every game like it's the 7th game of the World Series. And so it forces you, like, you know what? Because if that were October, Nico's probably playing unless he can't walk. Bellinger's probably playing unless he can't swing. But it's April. It's May. Like, let those guys sit. You're supposed to have enough depth.
You are supposed to have enough depth. And we're not talking about bringing in brand new guys. We're not talking about putting David Bodie back on the 40-man, which was a thing that I never thought would happen, but did. We're talking about bringing up Canario, PCA, to cover your center field and right field while your center fielder and right fielder are both injured, rather than rushing them back as quickly as possible. Vasquez can take over at shortstop, or maybe Nico plays shortstop and Vasquez plays second because you want to give Vasquez a little bit easier position for this. That's fine too. None of that happened. No. Like, they just kept pushing to get these guys back out there as if they're going to lose their job. This is not 1943. This is not, you will not lose your job because some young guy comes in and takes your spot. I mean, that's just not going to happen, especially with the way that, this team is run. And so I don't know why they force that. So, to your point, all these guys, Dansby, Seiya, Bellinger, Happ, all the Horner, all these guys, these are supposed to be your core. These are the guys you're supposed to be able to lean on while you have Morel over at third, Amaya behind the plate. You have Bush over at first. These are new guys. You've got a pretty young starting lineup, especially because of all the injuries that happened to the lineup right away. And you just keep pushing them rather than realizing these are human beings. We can't do this. We have to bring up these other guys. It's not the best solution in the world, but you get young players really good reps for
Yes.
a nice week or two for them to really get a run at it. And then you can easily send them back after your guy is healthy. But they're not doing that.
No.
They like, I mean, in the case of Nico Horner, breaks his hand, doesn't even go on the aisle. I don't know how that works. That to me is insanity. And you wonder, like, oh, well, how come Nico Horner has been struggling? Well, I mean,
Bad hamstring, broken hand.
He's played really well for a guy with a broken hand.
Yes.
But for a guy with a broken hand should never be uttered with the guys playing really well.
Right. Again, if we're in the playoffs, if this is game 6 and 7 of the World Series and he can go, maybe you do it. Maybe. But that's not what we're talking about. And
yeah,
I think back to the two recent Cub eras that were good, the 07-08 Cubs. That 08 team was probably as deep a Cubs team as I could remember. They were not an elite team in terms of being great at every position, so they got run out of the playoffs. But in terms of stacking up the wins, absorbing injuries, doing all that stuff, they were deep. They would play different lineups. Guys got rest. There were always guys coming off the bench, staying fresh and having big hits. And then go back to Joe Maddon's teams, 2015, 2016. You got guys like Tommy La Stella and Chris Coughlin, and those guys off the bench were getting regular work. I don't remember, unless a guy was nursing an injury and they were hiding him for a while, I don't remember any time a guy would go more than 4 days without getting a start somewhere. And it just keeps everybody fresh. To your point earlier with Mastroboni, I had made a tweet at one point when he was something like 0 for 12. And 9 of the 12 at-bats were against either Dylan Cease or closers. And if that's all you're seeing, you're just not going to hit. You're not hitting 300.
Right. And you haven't hit all day.
Yeah.
Maybe for a couple of days. You haven't been in the game.
Yeah.
You have to ramp up quick to get in there and do it. It's not easy.
And I know I become
the hardest position on the team is to be on the bench.
And I become the Miles guy, but it doesn't matter. Put anybody else in that mode. Put Canario in that mode. Put Madrigal in that mode. Put Patrick Wisdom in that mode. Like, Patrick Wisdom's not going to run into one if he doesn't get in the bat for a week.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about Madden's teams. 2015, 2016, you have guys getting injured and them calling up the young guys.
Mm-hmm.
And in that situation, it really was a Wally Pipp style thing where it was like, oh, no, these are our guys. We just didn't realize it yet, or the upper management was manipulating some time or doing some weird stuff. But, like, they figured out they didn't just keep running the same thing out there. They figured out how to use these young guys in a way that was best for the team and for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we ended up with Schwarber in 2015. That's how we ended up with Wilson Contreras in 2016. Both of whom made an impact in Game 7 of the World Series. Like, they both had big games that day. Like, all of this came from the fact that Joe Maddon was able to bring up these young guys and play them whenever and wherever he could. Like, do you remember who played left field for the 2016 team?
Like 7 guys.
Yeah. I'm like, the other day I was looking at him like, who did play left
Zobrist,
field?
Coughlin, La Stella, Contreras. Like, just pick a guy.
Literally everybody was out there at different times.
And the other thing about that, though, while they brought those guys up, they also didn't necessarily keep them up. I remember Schwarber going up and down a couple times because the main thing they wanted was for the guy to play pretty much every day. So while they had a guy down on the injured list, Schwarber would come up and hit for 2 weeks. He'd go back down to Iowa, keep getting regular bats. The next time they needed him, they'd call him back up. And then they did that with Contreras. And then you get to September and you say, like, what's my best 26?
Yeah.
And then
the difference is when they came up, they played.
Yes.
And that's what we've seen in the last 2 years has been glaringly obvious that getting a call up to the Chicago team from Iowa is kind of a death sentence. You get called up from Iowa and you're thinking, this is the greatest day of my life. And then you sit on the bench for 2 weeks and get sent back to Iowa. after having like 5 at bats. Like, what is going on? I don't understand that. And you know, so getting back to where we were starting here, like, I personally believe Craig Counsell had a plan. And I think it was a good plan, and I think it was working. And for whatever reason, once those injuries came in, things changed. I'm okay with you changing up the lineup, doing all that stuff when the injuries happen. What is not okay is when the injuries are quote unquote fixed and those guys are back. Why have they not gone back to what they were doing before? You know what I mean? Like, they didn't go back to that. Basically, they had their first like 5 or 6 guys set in the lineup, and then they shifted guys in the 7, 8, 9 slots depending on how they needed it. You know, maybe 1 up, 1 down from 5 to 9. But 1 through 4, 1 through 5, they were there.
It was basically Happ, Saya,
they were doing great.
Morel, Swanson every day.
Yeah.
And at this point now, maybe with what he's done, maybe I would slide Bush up to maybe to 5 now. But I mean, I don't mind Bush at 2, but like, to your point, I don't know why Happ's not gone back to the leadoff spot. I know he's hit really well 5th, so I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but he's such a classic go see 10 pitches leadoff spot.
That's the thing that frustrates me. So I looked this up, and so you got Tauchman, Happ, and then Bush. 3 guys in the top 10 of all National League. Maybe it was the entire league for pitches per at bat. I mean, they're in the top 10 of the entire league.
Yeah.
And so Tauchman, yeah, you're putting him up there. You're doing your best with him. I'm okay with that. But he's, you know, what do you want to do with him per se? You know, like, I'm not 100% sure what you want to do with him.
He really should be.
I'm
a
okay
fourth
with
outfielder.
him being up there. Right. But that's not how they started. They started with Happ up there because I think somebody sees what a lot of us see in that Happ, whether he likes it or not, is a good leadoff hitter. And when you look at the numbers and you look at all this stuff, it's like, well, is he? Well, first off, leadoff hitter is a tough spot. So is he going to have better numbers at 5? Yeah. But if you really want to look at good numbers for Happ, go to 6, go to 7, go to 8. He kills it. His numbers are out of this world at those spots. But that's because he's at the back of the order.
And that was when they had KB and Javi and Rizzo too.
Yeah, you're getting these things. You know, being the top guy is a tough thing. I get it. And like I said, he may not necessarily like prefer it. I'm not sure who he thinks he is exactly. I have tried to listen to his podcast a little bit. He seems like a pretty smart guy. Nobody has ever asked him, of course, it's his own podcast. Nobody's ever asked him, why don't you want to hit leadoff? That's what I want to know. I mean,
I've
that's
never
a
actually
simple
heard
question.
that he doesn't, except the fact that he doesn't tells me he probably doesn't.
Exactly. And that's what I don't understand. He sees it's like the 6th or 7th most pitches per at bat of anyone in the league. And they bat him 5th or 3rd or whatever. And people talk about like, oh, well, he's got better numbers at 3rd. Well, you know why he's got better numbers at 3rd? Because nobody's afraid of him. Like, Ian Happ is not your power hitter that goes at 3rd.
No.
You're not afraid of him because, honestly, you can just work those edges and he'll take his walk and be happy with it. That is not the guy you want batting 3rd. The guy you want batting 3rd is the guy who's going to go out there and get it and find the ball and make something happen. Well, it's the same thing that happened with KB.
Yeah.
Chris Bryant had an immaculate swing. Everything was wonderful with what he did when he hit it. But if you wanted to take Chris Bryant out of a game, all you had to do is work those edges and see if the ump will give you something. Because Chris Bryant wouldn't swing no matter what. And he would walk back and be like, well, look at the he'd look at the little box on the screen and he'd be like, well, I was right, and so it should have been a ball, so I don't have to change anything. And it's like, no, dude, you were out or you walked, and it didn't help the team. Like, you need the guy in that spot to hit the ball. Just hit the damn ball somewhere,
I think the biggest thing this team's missing is it's the guy they don't have. They don't have that guy that's got ideally you'd have two, but get one guy that's locked in at that like 140, 145, 150 WRC plus. The big producer, the guy who's going to hit 30 plus homers, is going to hit whatever he's going to hit. He's going to, OPS pushing 900. Just that one bat that, while everybody slumps, good enough ball player, like your Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge. The Cubs have the cartoon version.
Yeah.
But
look, Seiya Suzuki could be that guy for you. But, he's ripping it up right now. Like, even though it doesn't seem like it exactly, because a lot of times he does walk, like just watch strikes go right down there. But that's the whole team.
Yeah.
It's the ethos in the team is not to make something happen. It's to let something happen to you. That's
OBP. Where that one guy who's not necessarily going to take that walk, who's going to be more aggressive, change it, because
Wilson Contreras got booted from the team for that. They get rid of him.
But like, you look up and down this lineup, we do Cubs Pod every day, and while there are some occasional stinkers, the Cubs don't have much problem getting 10 or 12 guys on base almost every day. Because they'll get a few hits, they'll take some walks. It's not at all uncommon for them to load the bases with nobody out and not score. And it's just It's again, like you said, it's the walk. It's the, I'm not opposed to a walk, but there are too many times where a guy is up in that spot and you're like, well, we don't fear the guy behind him, so we're going to kind of nibble, and if we walk him, and we'll get the next guy out.
Yeah, exactly. Dansby Swanson has not been good all year. Not since he hurt his knee, and then he's been just sort of mediocre. Every so often he runs into one, hits a home run. He's done that a few times in June now. That's great, but nobody is afraid of him. And so anybody in front of him, and they'll take that walk. They'll always take the walk. I'm not against a walk either, but it's funny, like, the walk can be used against you.
Yes.
Like, if a team knows what you're going to do, they can use that against you. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you look at Hap's numbers in that 3-hole. Well, if they're not afraid of Hap hitting a home run, which I think the best he's ever done is 26 homers, right? Yep. And he only did that 1 year. They're not afraid of him going yard. And it probably doesn't matter because nobody's on base. So they just go after him. And when you go after a guy, they hit the ball. That's what major league players do. So his numbers look better. It's because at the next guy, they're like, we'll go after the next guy because he strikes out all the time or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, go ahead.
So a lot of people don't like talking about the lineup construction, but it really does make a difference. Ian Happ seeing all those pitches at the top and being willing to take that walk all the time, that's exactly the guy you want in that number 1 spot. The number 2 spot is your Nico Horner. He does not have the power to, hit homers. That's fine. He hits a lot of balls, though. And of the guys on the team, if you want somebody just to make contact, he's the guy that's going to do it. And he doesn't hit into a lot of double plays. Like, he stays away from that stuff for the most part. He's generally one of the better hitters.
I think the other option there, too, is you go with your best overall hitter. So maybe you put a Seiya there.
See, but why? What the fuck? You put Seiya there, and he hits a home run. Great. Good job. he does that at best 40 times a year. Or he strikes out, like that, or he takes a walk. That was the thing with Chris Bryant. You put your best hitter at 2. That was Chris Bryant. And he just walked all the time. They did not care about him. You put a guy like Nico Horner, nobody's afraid of him. They're going to try and go after him because they don't want to face Seiya at 3. And then you got 2 guys on, hopefully a guy in scoring position, so Seiya doesn't have to hit a dong to score somebody. He just hits the ball. And if 30 of those go out, it's 2 runs, and then Bellinger moves back to the 4. You get when I look at it, I see how individuals play the game differently in each person. Seiya doesn't seem to be, he doesn't take walks, really. I don't know. Maybe he does. I'd have to look that up. He tends to watch
he's a good
lot of balls. Yeah, he tends to watch a lot of balls just go right down the middle, and it drives me nuts. But
he's a little too passive overall in his approach. Like when he went on that tear at the end of last season, when they sat him down, he got way more aggressive, and he was way more aggressive on pitches in the zone. And right now, he's I think he's trying to be more aggressive, but he's not being as targeted. He's not just feasting on middle stuff like he did at the end of last year. And so he gets, I don't know if he's getting caught. Like I saw that he had a couple of bats yesterday that were just awful. I mean, I don't know if he's looking for something specific and so he didn't get it and he couldn't pull the trigger, but he took at least 3 pitches that were just like, dude, what else do you want?
Well, there's another thing. If you don't have your guy up front getting on base, then do you care if Seiya Suzuki hits a home run? Not really. It's a 1-run home run at the beginning of the game. You don't really care. And
for me, putting the best hitter too is more about throughout the game, ensuring that, and there's not a big difference between 2 and 4, but in just ensuring that your best guys are getting the most plate appearances.
And this is what frustrates me. You're not wrong. I can't say you're wrong at all. That makes all the sense in the world. But these guys are different. They play a different guys play different ways, right? And I don't know. The sum can be greater than its parts.
Agreed.
Right? But it has to be put together right. And just looking at these numbers and just saying, well, he's the best player, put him first or second because he gets the most at bats. That's frustrating to me because that's taking the human being out of it. If you watch, I would rather see Nico Horner up there just taking rips and making contact and doing all that stuff in the second spot and Seiya Suzuki getting a chance at 3. He's still getting the at bats.
I mean, I don't. Hate
I'm not saying let's put Seiya at 8. But it's this argument is yeah, will he get more at bats at 2? Yes. Will it help? I don't know. Could it be better to have somebody have him at 3? He's your best hitter. Could he be better if he gets 2 batters to see? Especially when you don't have a leadoff hitter and the idiot up in front of him at the start of the game takes 3 pitches and he's out and Seiya didn't see anything? Or he he swings at the first pitch. I mean, we see that a lot too. When they put Nico Horner at the top, that's what happens.
Yep.
He doesn't take a lot of pitches. He's up there to hit.
Or when he does try to take pitches, he's not hitting. He's taking pitches he would normally swing at and hit. It just changes his approach.
And so then you have a bad hitter up top with Nico Horner, even though the numbers would say that he should be fine there. But it's because what he does doesn't fit that position. And even if he gets his numbers there, it hurts the next guy in the lineup who is Seiya Suzuki because he's not taking the pitches that a guy like Happ or Talkman would take. Oh, the third guy in that was Michael Bush, amazingly. Michael Bush is number 9 in the league with pitches per plate appearances, which I was really surprised to see that. But anyway, that's why these things matter. Some people think it doesn't matter. You just look at the numbers and it goes. Well, the numbers change depending on how you use them. And if you want Seiya to be more successful in that 2 spot, get a guy up there who sees more pitches before he gets there. Or bump him 1 spot back, give him a few more to hit, and he hits it better, right? And then you get, and then that may help Bellinger too. You know, Bellinger has not been great. He also may be injured. I don't know.
Well, I'm going to spin this back a little bit. So let's
okay.
No, we'll get back into it, but from a slightly different perspective. So when I look at this team and talking about Ryno and the way he played the game and kind of that old school mentality, this team is terrible, and it has been for a good month plus, at situational baseball. And
it doesn't exist on this team.
No,
because they are numbers in a machine. That's it. They do not. Okay, I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I know we're gonna go on this one. This is good, but so many times, and I know I've picked on Dansby a lot on Cubs Pod because he's been up in some of those spots, and he's not always like, his whole career has not been like this. So maybe it is the playing hurt and all the lack of rhythm. But this team, like, however you look at it, whether it's individual player approaches, you get guys at first and second. We're not hitting to the opposite field. We are continuing to pull the ball right in the teeth of the defense. We're, the bane of your existence, the contact play. Like, so many of these situations, they're not moving that runner over. They're not elevating a ball to the outfield. They're not hitting to the first base side to get a guy over to third base with less than 2 out. And it just puts so much pressure on everything. And then you wind up getting to the bottom of the order, and between what has been Gomes and Amaya, an offensive black hole, or all those times where they had to play Madrigal and Mastroboni plus the catcher, it's almost, this lineup just is not deep enough, period, to start with. And then when you're not doing any of those little things, it's just atrocious. And this is where I think, we were going to talk about some of the advanced metrics. So you want to talk about expected batting average, expected slug, exit velo.
Oh, I don't want to talk about any of that stuff because it drives me insane. It's expect, you know what? I expect to make $1 million. Do you know what happens every day? I don't make $1 million.
Well, I'm going to talk about
I don't expect it.
I'm going to talk about the clip you shared, the Brian Kenny and Jake Peavy clip. Walk us through that. So,
who was the other guy?
The ESPN host.
Who was the accountant?
It was Brian Kenny from ESPN.
Brian Kenny, the accountant. Brian Kenny, CPA, ESPN.
So walk us through the clip of what you saw and why you reposted that on the Sun Ranto Show Twitter account.
So they were talking about a lot of, and this is sort of our sort of back and forth that we have. You view the game a little bit more analytically than I do. And I don't think it's that we see the game that much differently. It's that you're looking at numbers that help you see, like, okay, this makes the best hitter, right? These numbers. And then you put them in there and it's supposed to work because the numbers say it works. And that's what that accountant was talking about. Jake Peavy was talking about the same thing I always talk about. I don't hate the numbers. I start with the human. And then I say, wait, okay, why isn't this working? If it's working, I don't try to fix it.
Right.
But if it's not working, then I look and I say, okay, what can we do to help him succeed, right? That's what I'm looking at. And Jake Peavy was kind of saying that's that feel. That's a little bit of the feel of the game. In the game, you can't be controlled by these numbers 100%. You have to be able to look at the situation and, and I know all analytics people hate the word hunch. I don't even like the word hunch, but what are you going to call it? Like,
no, there's feel for sure.
Watching the game, you're into the game and you're like, this is what I think is about to happen, but the numbers tell me it's going to be different. So they were going back and forth on that, and I thought it was a really good conversation, and it's a lot of the conversations that you and I have. I don't think that they were seeing the game differently or that they were talking about it differently. It's that they are ultimately coming to slightly different conclusions based on what they think is, more important in the thing. I lean towards sort of a social way to like a social science. Like you look at how people act, how people react, what they're doing, their attitude. You look at those things, all these soft focused things. And by the way, I have a master's degree in organizational leadership, and this is all we freaking studied. So this is sort of where I'm at with this.
Yes.
It's how you manage a human and a team of humans versus looking at the numbers and then seeing if you can put together the numbers in a way to make the best team. You know what I mean?
I do.
And the answer is somewhere in between, obviously.
Yeah. So the way I look at it,
each side tends to get cordoned off and said, well, you said this, so you must not like this. That's not I don't think that's what either one of those guys were saying. But it's hard to parse that out sometimes. I thought it was a good conversation, though.
Yeah, I really liked it. And one thing I think that gets lost is when I try to do this. I don't always do a great job of it. But when I'm always trying to figure out the why or potentially be predictive. Like, what do I expect to happen and why do I expect it to happen? So that's when I go to the metrics. And all things being equal, and this is baseball, so all things are never equal.
All things are never equal.
I would rather have a guy who hits the ball hard, a guy who throws the ball hard, a guy who has massive movement on the pitch. Like, bare bones basics. Like, I don't need a 26-man roster made up of Nick Madrigal. But on the flip side, I don't know that I need 26 Aaron Judges either. I mean, I would take 4. That'd be pretty awesome. But when I look at this stuff, that's where I think hearing them talk, what I took away from that is you get to the point of the game. And so you have all the game planning. Like PV said, he always looks at the analytics and wants to learn, like, because Brian Kenny made the point. A lot of pitchers think my slider's my best pitch. But then you go look at like 2 seasons worth of data and you see that, well, actually they're not hitting your changeup. And so maybe doesn't mean you have to go through all changeups, but like, let's think a little more about the changeup. Maybe it's a better pitch than the pitcher thinks it is, or maybe it's a better pitch than they're expecting it to be.
And that might be, but if a pitcher isn't confident, so what you can do in that situation is you can show the pitcher and you can help the pitcher see, okay, we think that this is a better pitch than you might think it is, so that they can gain confidence and then want to throw it. But it's they're trying to force these things on a lot of these guys. It's like, you're going to throw more of these because we're seeing that it's better. But they're not ready for that yet. They're not confident with that pitch regardless. And maybe the reason that pitch is so good is that nobody expects it because they don't like to throw it.
It's possible. But PV had a great answer for that. He was like, I may see that my curveball is a better pitch than my slider, but I throw my curveball off my changeup, and today I don't have my changeup. My changeup is not there. I think that's exactly the example he used in that clip. Yeah. So I don't have it today, so I can't trust that pitch. I can't use the pitch I'm going to play off it because I can't establish it. And so in that moment, and that's where I had Brendan Miller from CHGO on my podcast towards the end of last couple weeks of the season. And he's very much an analytics guy, so I wanted to come in and talk pitching, and we were talking about some of the stuff. He made a really good comment that struck me, and I wound up naming the podcast episode after it. But when the Cubs got down to the last 2-3 weeks of the season, they had injuries, guys were starting to get hurt, whatever. At that point in the season, you can't make any more trades. You're not going to get anybody of any value off the free agent market for the most part. You have the guys you have, and you're now down to a 2 or 3 week sample size. So regardless of what the overall stats say, over 700 plate appearances, or over 3 seasons, over 200 innings, all that's out the door. All they have left is the noise part of the season. It's a small sample size. And basically, Brendan said, at this point, the car's driving itself. It's going to go how it's going to go. Because analytics-wise, you can't really do anything different at that point. And so where I think the analytics get misused is using them in a game-by-game sample. One thing that drives me nuts on Twitter is I'll see Christopher Morel today had an expected batting average of 870. Okay, he went 0 for 4 with 2 Ks, and he lined out twice. Like, on the whole, yeah, I want him to hit it the same way. And what I also try to use is I tried to stop. I like the expected stats. It does give you some idea, factoring in where they hit the ball, how hard they hit the ball, what kind of pitch they hit. However, you also have to look and see, it can kind of give you a sample or an idea of, is this guy probably going to get better? Like, is he going to sort of regress upward to the mean? Or is he getting really lucky right now? He just, Dansby Swanson in the last week, maybe he's had 7 bloop hits. Like, at some point, if he doesn't improve his quality of contact, they're going to stop falling in, because that's how baseball tends to work. And you can expect, he's not really hitting that well. He's just getting kind of lucky right now. But when you're looking at those small sample sizes, you got to look more. And even then, sometimes guys don't come back to the mean. Like, we've talked a lot about Javier Assad. I did an episode on him a few episodes ago. And while he's struggling a little bit right now, I think a lot of that's workload. His metrics don't say he should be as good a pitcher as he's been now for over 200 career innings. And so some guys do just sit outside the mold. And then you got to dig into why. And so I look at like Christopher Morel. He has all these great expected stats, hits the ball hard a lot, but it's often on the ground or it's not elevated enough to get out. And it's to the same like 4 spots on the field. Where on the flip side, Javier Assad's numbers say he shouldn't be this good. But if you look at pitch by pitch, his 2-seamer is actually been performing like a league elite pitch. And so that makes difference.
So when we're talking about Christopher Morel, it's one of those things like, actually, let's back up.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about the numbers and the game to game. And I think something that Jake Peavy didn't exactly say, but that I've started to try and work my head around here recently, the numbers tell you a lot.
They do.
They really do. But they're macro.
Exactly.
They're macro. You
big picture, small
make
picture.
Those numbers. Yeah. Each game is a small sample size.
Mm-hmm.
Each game has nothing to do, well, not nothing, but it has a lot less to do with the overall numbers.
Would agree completely.
Than people want it to. Like they think, oh, well, Shota Imanaga has a 1.97 ERA, so there's no possible way that he's going to give up 10 runs in 3 innings.
Exactly.
Well, that's not true. It's the Apple TV showing the probability.
Oh God,
that's the wrong
such
word.
garbage.
You can't do that. Everything is a guy against a guy on a day.
Mm-hmm.
It's the smallest sample size you could ever possibly think about. And to have these guys thinking about the macro, about the numbers, about the expected, about the trying to predict all of this stuff and trying to do all of this, like, that's bad. It's bad for baseball. It's bad for the players. It's just not good. They need to be able to go out there. They need all of that stuff, like Jake Peavy was saying, before the game.
Yep.
But you get in the dugout. I personally, and you actually agreed with me over on Discord, take the iPad, take the phone, take all the electronics, take all that crap out of the dugout. You do all of your work.
But
oh, well, that's what I was saying. And I
think I agreed with a larger point, but either way.
No, well, I'm saying take all of that out, because what happens is, and they were talking about this maybe last night, I don't know, but these guys, they go back to the dugout and they grab an iPad and they grind. They are not playing a game.
I do think they do it too much.
Grinding it out.
I think sometimes you might want to go see one thing.
Do it after the game. Do it after the game or when you get pulled. That's the perfect time to take the time to look at it and do it. Or a coach should maybe freaking coach. Like, they're letting these guys do it themselves, and they're getting over there with their buddy, and they're looking at it and doing it. That's great. I love the teamwork. But the coach is the coach for a reason, and they should be the ones going, hey, here's something we need to look at because you've done this like 3 times in a row or whatever. Otherwise, when they come back to the dugout, it's just like Little League. Good job, kid. You'll get them next time. The coach knows whether or not that was a good strikeout, a bad strikeout, whether they need to address something or not. And they will. If they're a good coach, you know, maybe not the manager. I mean, Craig Counsell is watching the game. He can't do that. But he's got 3 guys around him, and he should say, you know, go talk to Christopher about what he just did on that, right? Yeah. And then maybe he can go and look at it. But it's like all of this stuff is fine on its face, but I think ultimately it gets in the way. Like it's information overload all the time when they should be out there playing. Ryne Sandberg, in his recap interview, he was talking about, he said, me and Grace and Dunston all knew we would look at each other, and we knew, and we'd move over or move here, move there, each pitch. They knew that. They worked on that. So they didn't use an iPad. It wasn't analytics. It wasn't all these things that they keep talking about. It was guys working on the game. And when you
it was still analytics. Great. It was just that form of analytics. It was from watching video and watching tape before the game.
That's the sort of thing that is, they have to work together to figure it out, right?
Sure.
Whereas this guy is going in and he's looking at himself on the iPad and he's like, I did this and I didn't do that and I did this and blah 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 blah, and he's grinding in his head when he really should just be trying to relax and forget about it and get ready for the next inning.
Yeah, I think there's too much. I think sometimes it's I could see wanting to take like one thing from every bat. Like, what did I do that I missed that 2-strike pitch that I just fouled back?
Do that. Just do it after the game.
Well, you might want to do it next time before you face that pitcher
when
again,
you can focus on it.
But what I don't want them doing is breaking down their entire, to your point, I don't want them breaking down their entire bat, rewatching every pitch. Like, if there's one thing they want to go see, I'm fine with them going to see it. But and
here's the other thing I talked about on the podcast today. The Cubs are out here all like, and you kind of said it earlier. They're all doing the same thing. None of them are Aaron Judge. They're all trying to be Aaron Judge. Every single one of them is in, like I said earlier, hit the ball hard and see what happens. That seems to be the only coaching happening. Every one of them is out there just ripping, pushing hard as they can to just hit the ball hard. And it's like, well, how come Christopher Morel always hits it to the same place? Well, because he's got no finesse in his swing. He's got no ability to try to direct a ball or to hit situationally because he's been told just go out there and swing. Just swing hard and do it this way or take the pitch. Like, that's it.
Well, look at Dansby. When Dansby starts to get going, he's hitting right center to left center. When he gets pulling the ball all the time, that's when he goes in those big prolonged slumps. That's why I was hoping he was breaking out of it a week or so ago. He hit opposite field homer or two, had a couple doubles the other way. Like, when he's spraying the ball, he's more locked in. It's more that center approach. and they're just not getting out of it. And I flip back to Ryno. So one thing he's talked about a lot over the years is when Jim Fry pulled him aside and told him, hey, you're a big guy. You should be able to pull the ball and hit with some more power than you're hitting it with. One thing he struggled with early, but frankly got it pretty quickly because in 1984 he hit 19 triples and 19 homers, was picking your spots on when to do that. Like, know what pitch you can pull and drive. Know the situation. Know it's, we're down. We're down a run. I've got two guys on base. If I can get something to the wall, we're probably going to score 2 runs. Like, now's the time to go swing a little bit harder, try to really drive that pitch versus we're down 1, there's 1 out, nobody on. I just got to get on base somehow. And
use the pitches that are coming to you.
And it takes me back to what was the biggest offensive success last season?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Seiya? I don't know where you're going with
I would say Bellinger's change in approach with 2 strikes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he was a guy who was, the last few years of the Dodgers, he was trying to hit to the upper deck, right field all the time. Big swings, tons of Ks. He really slashed the strikeout rate. I think I remember he had one of the top 8 or 10 batting averages with 2 strikes in all of baseball last year. And to an extent, one of the things that people were looking at in free agency was, well, his average exit velo was down. Well, no shit, it was down because every time he has 2 strikes, he's actually shortening up and just trying to poke a ball to left field. And he did that really well. And he's still kind of doing that. He's kind of lost that a little bit lately. But also, since he's been hurt, I don't know how much that played into swing mechanics and all that kind of thing.
Right. Well, and again, I don't know what's going on exactly this year, but I noticed, so you're talking about Assad,
Yeah.
And I know this drives you nuts when people are like, oh, the bullpen was terrible when they didn't give up any runs. Like, people just don't, aren't really looking.
Or they give up a run or 2, but the Cubs didn't score anything that day anyway. So
yeah. Assad's pitching yesterday actually wasn't that bad. The 2 pitches that he got killed on were both homers. Mm-hmm. Both of those were actually okay pitches. It's just that the Mets, instead of, we're talking Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo. If they were on the Cubs, they would be swinging out of their damn shoes every single time. They swing the bat hard, but those 2 pitches, that ball was not a pull ball.
No.
That was a go out and get it. And they went out and they got it and they let the ball go. They went with the pitch that they were given and they went opposite field to the exact same place. So, Assad didn't really make very many bad pitches. Those weren't even terrible pitches. They were not as good as you want, obviously. But it was like, he got by a couple of guys who went with the pitch that they were given.
Yeah.
And put good wood on it. And none of the Cubs do that. They don't ever seem to go with a pitch that they're given, except for possibly Nico Horner.
Haps, but when he's hitting better, he does it. Say sometimes. It's just so inconsistent. And I think the biggest thing for me with Assad,
and it might be inconsistent with the Mets too. I just happened to notice that, and I was like, look at these guys just swinging nice, easy swings.
Well, and that team's hot right now. That's kind of where the Cubs were in April. Even Shota. Shota was definitely off his game. He did not have a great start, but I definitely one, and I think 2 of those home runs were on pitches up out of the zone where Seiya was actually trying. God, I gotta stop doing that. Where Shota, not Seiya. Where Shota was actually trying to pitch the ball. Alvarez hit one that was like at his chin, but he was looking for the high. Yeah. But he was looking for the high fastball, and he got his hands up there.
Yep.
The biggest thing.
And I love when people say, "Oh, they're figuring him out," and then when you look, you're like, "They aren't figuring anything out. That ball was above the zone." That's not figuring a guy out if you hit a ball that's at your chin out of the park.
The biggest thing for me with Javi the other day was that just he wasn't locating the 2-seamer, and then when he kind of did, he wasn't getting any calls, and so he's just running up his pitch count. I swear, the first 2 or 3 innings, probably 80% of the batters had a 2-2 or 3-2 count, and he was just running up his own pitch count. But he'll fight and he'll keep you in a ball game. He gave him a chance.
See, and that right there, too, that's where I think having a guy as young as Amaya back there doesn't help him. And I don't know why the coaches weren't working with him. Like, yeah, he was not getting that call on the edges of the plate, and it sucked. But I hate when people act like, oh, my God, it was such a terrible call. No, some of them are. But a lot of them are like, they can go either way. You just want everything to be perfect, you know, like, and it drives me insane. Everybody wants everything perfect all the damn time. And it's like, that's a 50-50 ball right there.
Yeah.
And
even with a challenge system, most of those are 50-50 balls. I just want to stop the egregious ones, like when they rung up Say on that pitch, like there was legitimately 6 inches outside. Like I don't need a K-zone box to see that was over the chalk in the left-handed batter's box.
Right. But at the same time, and I'd have to go and look at when and where that was, there's an ability for people to work the zone that they're given as well. You know, like, I honestly could care less if it's 6 inches out of the zone, as long as every ball that's thrown there is a strike. If it's a strike one time and it's a ball the next time, then the ump has to go away. But if it's always a strike, get over it. Hit the damn ball. Like,
to a point.
But they won't do it. No, these are professionals. Get over it. This is what we've done for 100 freaking years.
Get better umpires.
They get over it. What?
Get better umpires.
Greg Maddux had over 300 wins, and he's in the Hall of Fame. And it's not because he threw strikes.
No, I get it.
It's because he made umpires think a strike was something different. It was beauty. It was artistry. It was amazing. And that happens. And an umpire, again, and I will argue this the rest of my life, that box is garbage. It's bullshit. It doesn't do. Sorry, we don't cuss on this podcast. You'll have to bleep that later, whenever it is. But no, it just has to be consistent. It just has to be consistent. If it's consistently 6 inches out, then you just got to go get the ball. Like, you know what the ump is doing, and that's what players have done the entire existence of baseball. If an umpire has a zone that you don't like, well, you take your 0 for 4 and go sit down, or you figure out how to hit that ball, right? That's it. It's easy. But anymore, now they're going and they're sitting and they're like, oh, it's in the box. It's not in the box. And will somebody bring me a tissue? I'm really upset. And what they get from it is, what the players get from it when they look at that crap is, I was right. The player says, I was right. The ump was wrong. And so I don't have to change anything. Well, guess what? The next time you go up there and the ump rings you up again,
I'm with you there.
well, you're still out. You're always out every time. The ump can be wrong every single time.
I do like,
but if he's wrong in the exact same way, he's doing a good job.
I do like overall.
That's my opinion on it.
I like that the umps are getting more feedback than ever before, so that from over the course of a season, from season to season, they can see, we don't want you calling this, because right now I think baseball has always gone back and forth between hitting errors and pitching errors, and like one of the things that made Maddux so absolutely beautiful was he was doing that during the Royd era. Like, he was just bringing guys up when all the hitters were juiced and Brady Anderson somehow hitting 57 home runs in the season. Now I think, while I'm with you, the hitters have to make the adjustment. I still coach all my kids the same way and all that. You get to a point where we don't need pitchers right now consistently getting 4 inches off the plate, because it's not a pitch you can really do anything with. Even if you're going to poke it, tap it, hit it the other way, I would rather call a more fair strike zone and enforce that if there's a way to do it, because I want more offense back in the game.
My argument is that it's not unfair. And the reason offense is going out of this game has nothing to do with what the pitchers are doing right now. It has to do with that stupid fake box. These guys look at that box every damn day and they say, I'm fine. I'm good. I don't have to change anything I'm doing because the ball's not in the box. Well, you know what? These umps are showing over and over and over. And the other thing that drives me nuts is when they say that the consistency. Oh, it was bad consistency. That's not true. The consistency is fine. Just because it's out of the box doesn't make it inconsistent.
It depends on the
consistency. Everything is, like I said, everything is the smallest of sample sizes. It's that one time out there. And if you got a guy who is behind the plate and he's calling this ball 6 inches out a strike every single time, that's the strike zone. And I don't care. When you're coaching, it's like the only reason that we even have these conversations is because now we have technology that shows that it's there. Whereas in the old days, they would just figure it out. And they might hack and swing and look weird doing it and not make good contact. But then sometimes they would, but they would try to do it. You want to know why pitchers were able to go deep into these games? Because they could make these things happen.
No, it's because they weren't throwing max velocity all.
Well, that too, but they didn't have to because they didn't have to throw it over the plate every single damn time. There's a give and take. Like,
I think it's way more the spin and the velo than it is the strike zone, but I do agree that
but the strike zone isn't helping anything because everybody thinks that they have this idea of what the strikes, like the hitters think this is my strike zone and this is the only thing I should ever worry about. And I've worked with kids playing baseball. And when they come off, sometimes you tell them that was a ball, right? You tell the kid that was a ball. You got rung up. That was a ball. Get over it, go back, do it again.
But know it for next time.
But then other times you tell the kid, okay, that was the third ball that you got struck out on.
Right.
Like, it's a ball, but you have to hit the ball. Like, it's like that is gone away at the major league level because of this stupid box on the TV.
So I'm with you at 2 strikes for sure. I think early in the count, I don't give a crap. If it's a 50-50 ball on the outside and say Suzuki doesn't want to swing at it because he's looking for something middle in with no strikes, cool. You wouldn't have swung at that in 1982 either. It's when you get to that 2-strike pitch because to your point and to the point we've made with the advanced metrics, that's a 1-pitch sample size. The umpire might screw it up. Even if we get to a point where we have a challenge system, the pitch might not read.
If it's inconsistent with what the ump has been doing all day, sure. But if it's consistent with what... See, here's the difference. Everybody wants perfection. And I have been made fun of for this. Perfection sucks. Perfection is not fun. Perfection is garbage. I don't like it. Perfection is not good for the game. Perfection is boring. Like, everybody wants this to happen. And, man, we're running really long. And so I'm going to take this perfection right into Christopher Morel.
Yes, let's go.
Everybody has been going over this over and over and over. Christopher Morel is bad at third base. Okay. Last night, John Sciambi, the booger eater himself, booger belly, boog, I hate this guy. He's on the broadcast and he's so happy because he doesn't have to actually act like he likes the Cubs anymore. And because it's a national game. And Christopher Morel is out there in the third inning. Well, we'll go to the second inning in a minute, but in third inning, he makes a good play. The other Muppet in the booth over there says, "Oh, Christopher Morel just made a good play." Sciambi goes off and says, Christopher Morel is bad at third. He says he's bad at third. He's been terrible all year. He's not good. And while he's saying that, Christopher Morel makes an even better play.
Yep.
Those
are great plays.
Fine at the position. everybody wants perfection. They act as if he's so bad because they look at these damn numbers and the numbers say, oh, he's -7 defensive runs saved. What is a defensive run? And by the way, it's -3 for the games he's actually played. It's -7 for the year, which he hasn't done yet. And if it's -3 over 60 games, how many runs per game is he hurting the Cubs? Tell me that. It's nothing. And that's what I'm talking about. Everybody wants perfection. They look at these things and they're not looking at what the real numbers mean. -3 defensive runs saved over 60 games is not the best in the league.
No.
But is it really so bad? The answer is no.
Well, so
it's not.
I think you have to,
and he actually, if you really look, he's right there in errors. He's got 8 errors. Nolan Arenado, one of the greatest third basemen that there's ever been, has 5. And you know who has the most errors this year at third base? Matt Chapman. He has 12.
Chapman's had surprisingly terrible year defensively.
He's at a couple, but it's like, but this has been the argument. It's like, oh, Chapman would have been so good over at third, and they should have taken Chapman because he can play third base. And everybody thinks Chapman can play third base. And the answer is he can.
Yeah.
But guess who else can? Christopher Morel can. They all can. The difference between the best and the worst is so small, but everybody wants perfection. They won't allow anybody to grow into a position at all.
I think that's the key point. Growing in the position is big, because we've seen Christopher Morel improve. We have seen Michael Busch. Started the year, he was rough at first base, but he's never played there for an extended period of time. And, he's not going to win a Gold Glove this year, but he's certainly getting better. And it's all about context for me. So Christopher Morel is not certainly a bottom quarter defensive third baseman, however you want to slice it, whatever metrics you want. But it's about the fact that he's 24. He's got massive power. He's a guy you want to see if he can develop. And maybe he won't. Maybe he won't get any better than he is today defensively. And maybe he'll continue to hit right about 200 pounding balls right at the third baseman all day long. And if that's the case, in 2 years, he's going to be out of baseball. But that might not be the case. He might grow like a lot of young players do. And it's also about what you have to put in place. What drove me absolutely nuts is putting Nick Madrigal in defensive metrics. Love Nick Madrigal because basically if he touches a ball, he's going to make the play. Some of the metrics don't like him because he's got to play so shallow. He's got such limited range. He can't go to the line. He can't play a deep third base. He can't be like where Dansby would be deep in the hole. But they would make that substitution for defense in a game where it's freaking tied, knowing that there's a chance that Morel's spot might come back up in the batting order. Now, if you have...
And what were you... And what did you really get from that, right? That's the thing that drove me nuts. Nick Madrigal, like I just said, Matt Chapman, Nolan Arenado, these guys are supposed to be the best in the league. And, they're not so much better that you're going to change the game defensively by putting them in there instead of Morel. So how do you figure, or how did they figure that Madrigal was going to do that for him?
And there's a certain element of instincts. And I don't know that Morel has great... I think Morel is learning and he's clearly getting better. But like Nolan Arenado was always a third baseman who always played third base and came up that way. And some guys like Sandberg at second base just always had a knack for where to be, where the play was going to go, what to do in the situation. Morel's got to learn that. And he's going through that process now. He doesn't learn that by watching Nick Madrigal play third base. Nick Madrigal does have a little bit more of he's always been an infielder, right? I mean, he played shortstop in college. He played second base most of his time as a pro. So he kind of knows how the infield flows, but it's just that experience. And what I've really liked seeing this year is that they're just going to, for the most part, I get frustrated with the late game sub outs, but for the most part, they're just letting Morel do it, which they did not do at all last year. And this goes back to some of the stuff I said earlier in the show about like opportunities missed last year to kind of know what you had. Let's say Morel doesn't ultimately make it as a third baseman, which maybe that's still possible. It would have been nice to know that last year so that they could potentially make different decisions.
And I'm making the argument right now that Christopher Morel has already made it as a third baseman.
Oh, I actually agree with that point.
Me.
But
he's a Ramos Ramirez. A Ramos Ramirez would have a year where he would be really good at third. Then he'd have a year he wouldn't be so good at third. He kind of went up and down because year to year things change. You are more injured, less injured. You fouled 57 baseballs off of your foot somehow every time, hit the same toe. But like these things happen. But it's like everybody wants this damn perfection all the time. They're like, well, because Nick Madrigal is 0.02% better in some metric, we're actually going to pull this kid off of the field and put Madrigal over there. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, and that's the accountancy part of it. It's like when you're not looking at the human, you're not looking at the player. You want Christopher Morel to feel confident that he can play third base. How about you don't pull him every single game?
Well,
how about you don't talk about, you don't now the team doesn't really have a say over this, but a guy like Shambi does. How about you don't talk about how bad a player he is, how bad defensively he is, especially while he's making good plays on the field as you speak.
Yes. Well, and here's a counterexample. So, like, we would both agree, I think, that PCA is just amazing on defense. He's electric.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you have that kind of player, let's say they had a PCA equivalent who could play third base but didn't hit at all. If you've got that guy to put in there in a late game situation, that's different than putting in Nick Madrigal.
Right, except for the fact that...
Well, unless you're going to need that position to come back up.
The number of balls going there and who you have up to... Like, there's so much going into it. You don't actually get...
You don't get the same return. It's not as premium as center field. But the point is, it's not like the Cubs have a Gold Glove caliber third baseman sitting on the side to put in.
Yeah, or that there's one available anywhere in the league. Right? Like, there is not this other player. Everybody's talking about Matt Shaw.
He's learning third base
never
too.
played. He's never played at the major league level. He doesn't know. Nico Horner said at the beginning of the year, when they asked him about playing third, he was like, hell no. It is so hard to play third. Nico Horner, who plays second at a Gold Glove level, he plays above average shortstop, said, I'm not even going to try third base. It's a hard position. It's quick. Everything gets on you so fast, and Morel is handling it over there just fine. And that's the thing. Nobody lets him be just fine. Like, I think he's doing a good job, and I see way more made plays than failed plays. He's got 8 errors. He has played 59 games at third base.
I think the biggest frustration right now that is how, if Christopher Morel was
some of those errors came 2 at a time because he got the error on the fielding and the throwing at the exact same time. So that's really just one error.
Or he's had 2 or 3 games with multiple errors in the game. Like, so they do tend to be concentrated for him. Like, I remember he had 2 on opening day, and then he went like a month before he had his next one. But I think the other thing is it's highlighted by the fact that, one, this team is playing so many close games. So every little bit in the margins matter. And 2, honestly, the rest of the defense is Dansby's. Again, I think a lot of it's playing with injuries, but Dansby's not been the same caliber at shortstop. Nico's not had the same year at second base. the team defensively as a whole has not been nearly as good as last year, and it's not because of Christopher Morel, but it does make the mistakes he make get more scrutiny.
Well, and that's sort of a little bit what I was alluding to before, like the way that everybody talks about him. They, it's the book is already written. He's just bad at third. That's what everybody says. Yesterday during the game, PCA, who you just said, he's a great center fielder. I think he's a great center fielder. And he caught, or he didn't catch a ball, but he set up when he caught it to make a throw. The piece of hair that talks on ESPN said PCA threw a strike to Christopher Morel. Wrong.
He made a heads-up throw. That's what he made.
Yeah. And Christopher Morel had to dig that out of the dirt and make the tag at third base.
I think they both should have gotten credit on that play.
But it's like PCA is a good defender. Mm-hmm. Christopher Morel is a bad defender. And it's like even on a play where PCA didn't make the best throw, he gets credit because the narrative is that he's good. And Morel doesn't get the credit because the narrative is that he's bad. But the truth is they're both very, very good. And you just need to let them play and let them work together. And that seems to be the thing that nobody wants to do. They don't want to allow for Christopher Morel to have a bad game here and there. Like he has to be perfect or he's not good.
But the one person who doesn't agree with that is Counsell, because Counsell keeps putting him back out there every day.
And Counsell said right at the beginning, again, plan A. Counsell's like, Christopher Morel's my guy. He's going to be out there. Togman already made this team before spring training even started. PCA, you're not going to be on the team when we go to Chicago. He said it right off the bat. But then when PCA did come up and started playing well, like, then they got rid of him at like a weird time too. Like right when Bellinger went on the IL or something. It was they did some weird stuff with him. And I'm just like, what is going on with PCA? The exact moment that he could definitely get some more playing time.
And that was also when Tauchman was at his peak and
right.
But
it's just so weird. Like there's room for PCA to play every day. Maybe not in center field, but there are 3 positions out there with guys that could just use days off or be DH for a day. Like there's no, and I'm not necessarily saying PCA should play left field.
No, he should probably always play center field. You move the other guys around.
Right. You can let Canario play left field. Wait.
You can't because he's in Iowa, but.
Right, because he's in Iowa. I don't know, but I mean, you could actually. I mean,
Bellinger was in left field last week, one game.
Who?
Bellinger was in left field for at least a late game situation.
Is that right? I know. Yeah, I know he was in right field as well.
I mean, he won his Gold Glove in right field, so.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and he's a great first baseman.
Mm-hmm.
And when Michael Busch was having his problems, and you're right, he is getting better. But when he was having his problems over there. Like, they had the opportunity to have their best defensive lineup being Bellinger at first and PCA at center, and they just rarely did it.
But I do
and you can still keep doing that.
But I do like the fact that with Counsell, like last year there was no commitment to young players ever. Counsell has committed to giving Morel a lot of run. He's committed to working Michael Busch at first base.
But it's almost like those are the guys that he's allowed to.
Yeah.
Because Canario doesn't get a chance. Vasquez didn't get a chance when we absolutely needed Vasquez up there. They brought up Bodie. They put Bodie on the 40-man roster. Now,
I think they're trying to trade him.
They probably are. And the other idea is that they don't care if he doesn't get a lot of at-bats.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's why Mastro came back up.
Yeah. But, like, they just keep putting these guys out there, and they're like, well, we don't know why we're so bad. But they won't bring up their best players and then let them play once they get there.
At least they're finally doing it with PCA. And he doesn't have to play literally every day. I mean, I'm also in favor of looking at the matchups and the kind of pitcher a guy is. Like, I want PCA and Bush to see some left-handed pitching, but you don't have to start them against the nastiest lefties in the league.
Oh God, I hate the left-handed.
I know you do
lineups,
but some lefties are absolutely brutal on left-handers, and you want PCA and Bush to be in positions to get confidence.
That's fine. Those guys bat at the back of the order. They're gonna see him twice at best.
Well, but the point is,
and they might be good at it. You don't know. They don't have a chance to practice against left-handed pitching. There's no practice in the major leagues.
My bigger point is that if the lineup is working the right way, everybody's getting 1 to 2 days off every week. So if those 1 or 2 days, if you're going to get 1 or 2 days off anyway, have it be against the worst matchups.
And I would be fine with that if they did that, but they don't. They absolutely don't do that. Hap is out there every single day. Like he's.
I just mean they've been doing it
there.
Mostly lately. They've been doing it with Bush and PCA. PCA has been a lot of it's talk been being hurt, but he's playing way more days than he's not.
But it's also because they can use Bellinger at first.
Yeah.
Because they can use Bellinger at first, and they can move him, and that's what I was talking about weeks ago. Those 3 players should be used in conjunction with each other.
Yep.
Because you can move them around, where PCA only plays center, Bush only plays first base, but Bellinger, your guy who's good at both, can do both. And then he can spell Seiya a little bit if he needs to. Like that happens. It just seems so weird. But then like Hap never seems to ever come out of the game. Dansby Swanson never comes out of the game. Nico Horner never comes out of the game. And it's like we have guys that could take those spots once in a while. And like you're saying, when you see that you've got a good matchup, like if you, and it doesn't have to be the best matchup in the world, but if you're just like, you know what, we maybe can get by with a slightly lesser second baseman today. Let's put Nico on the bench or DH or give him a break, and he's available to go out whenever. You don't have to stick with it the whole game.
One of the things that drives me nuts with lineup construction is, from the fan side, is when literally like there are people out there I see on Twitter every single day saying, you got to play the best 9 every day. You don't, because none of your guys would ever get a day off. So there just have to be a day where, you know what, I'm not playing Dansby today. I'm not playing Nico today. And hopefully it's not like the Joe Madden getaway day lineup where your whole starting lineup.
I was going to say the Cubs seem to do that. Like we're just going to try and throw away this game. We're just going to put out the worst lineup that we can.
Yeah.
So that we can have the best lineup the rest of the week. It's like, what?
But yeah, but
you don't have to do that.
Play a game without Hap, play a game without Dansby, play a game without Nico, and rotate it through. Keep guys fresh. And it's just what I've seen the last 2 years is just so much like there's so much pressure on every single game. And it's because everything is close and the Cubs are always like right in the fringe. Like just play ball.
Right. And I just don't see the leadership for this team. I don't know who this team is. The team doesn't know who they are. Like I said, like that like left-handed hitter thing drives me insane because not only will they move guys, change the whole lineup, they'll take a guy like Ian Happ out of the leadoff spot, even though he's a switch hitter. It's like he's still Ian Happ. Yeah. And if he's your leadoff guy, why isn't he still your leadoff guy?
Yeah, he's still going to see 8 pitches.
Yeah. All this stuff. It is just it's so frustrating to see all that stuff. And like you said, everybody says you got to put out your best 9 guys. Who are the best 9 guys? Well, that's where we get into this whole analytics versus feel thing. And the truth is the best 9 guys changes day to day. Because everything is a tiny sample size and you have to take way more into account than the numbers. And the accountants tend to just think it's the numbers is all that matters.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating to me.
Well, that's where I want to line up. I want to take the big picture numbers and put it out there. And then, one thing I don't know as a fan, when I look at any day's starting lineup, I don't know who went to council and said, hey, I'm tired, or maybe I'm not really injured, but like my leg's tight today. Like today's maybe just not a good day for me to go out there, or you're a relief pitcher and you haven't pitched in 3 days, but my arm's sore. So maybe I'm not available today. I don't know what those things are. And I don't know what goes into, those kinds of decisions. But what I do know is, like, on the flip side, on the extreme, remember back in the day when Dusty Baker was absolutely in love with Nefi Perez. Like, if there was any use of metrics whatsoever, Nefi Perez never would have played. But it was his gut hunch every day to bet Nefi Perez 2. And but that's not so much the issue anymore. But put the big picture numbers out there, and then use the feel of the day, because we could have a matchup where Cody Bellinger is faced a guy 50 times and he's hitting 640 on his career against his pitcher. Obviously, great matchup. You probably want him in the lineup. Doesn't mean he's not going to go for 4, because the pitcher's still gotten him out 36 times.
Yeah, exactly. And, and to your point, I don't know if anybody's saying I'm tired or I need a day off or anything.
I just mean I don't know if. Maybe they are, maybe they're not.
No, I know. But I'm just saying the culture seems to be that you're not allowed to take a day off. We don't care if you've got a broken rib, a broken hand, a hamstring, anything. You don't get a day off. We're going to give you the minimum amount of time and you're going to get back out there. That seems to be the culture on this team.
I think the culture on the team personally is, I think a lot of it's coming from the players. I mean, Dansby came in day one saying he never wanted to sit out a game.
Okay. And if it's coming from it has to,
the coaches have to get in the way and make them sit.
The coaches need to say it. And that's why I'm saying, I don't think that there's any leadership. Like they're talking about, we got our clubhouse leaders. You don't need clubhouse leaders. You need management leaders. And I think that comes from the Jed Hoyer and the Carter Hawkins. The top. They are, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how they're running this team. It doesn't really seem to make any sense. Like I said, I felt way more comfortable with the beginning of this year. And it wasn't just because they were winning. Because if you know me, nothing drives me more nuts than winning for the wrong reasons. Mm-hmm. I hate it because then you just do the wrong things.
But they were legitimately playing really good baseball.
Yeah, but they had a plan,
mm-hmm.
and they went with the plan. And it's the old Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, they got punched in the face and they have no plan. They didn't go back to the plan. They didn't go back. They didn't say, "Wait, what's the plan?"
They got punched in the face. They stuck with the plan, continued to win enough that you thought it was going to come back. And then at some point they got punched in the face the 5th time. And then that's when it all went away.
I don't think they didn't start getting punched in the face until Dansby Swanson didn't go on the IL for 2 weeks. And that's when they started to lose. And they just, and from that point, that's the turning point in this season right now.
Yeah.
Those games, those 7 losses through that time frame, because it hurt them really bad. And then, because you got it, and they weren't making any effort to bring up healthy guys.
Well, yeah, because when Seiya went down, Mike Tauchman played well enough that they were getting by. And
right.
And then you had the Dansby thing kind of immediately. I don't remember the exact dates, but the Nico hamstring was not very long after that.
The Nico hamstring came about 5 games.
It was right around the time Dansby actually went on the IL, because that's when we got that stretch of Madrigal and Mastroboni playing together.
Yeah. When we have Vasquez.
Yes. What the hell?
And then the day that they bring Dansby and Horner back, they both start. That was the day they brought Vasquez up.
Yes.
And then he never played. It's like,
he got one at bat. Yeah.
He could have played for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
He could have played for 3 weeks.
And you know what?
And then Dansby might not have this, and I don't know if his knee is lingering but he might be better.
Well, and sometimes you get in the situation where you're not healthy, so you're trying to compensate for things which cause other issues, and all of a sudden, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a good enough coach watching TV to pick up on it all, but there could be some lingering mechanical issues that Dansby's put in from the bum knee.
Yeah, well, and
Nico could be compensating for his hand,
and that's why their managers need to be the ones making decisions, not letting it happen, not letting them make these decisions or having conversations about it and blah blah blah. No, just make the decision. Just you have to have a plan, like you said earlier, and you're like, there's no plan B. No, there isn't, and they won't go back to plan A. Like, it's just right now they just let everything happen to them. It is super, super frustrating.
Well, hey, the Cubs are off to San Francisco. I'm gonna start to wrap this one up at almost 2 hours, like last time. You're my
2 hours. I know.
Hey, that's 2 times.
I really like talking baseball
great
with
discussion.
you. We go back and forth. I don't know if we ever. The worst part about, even though it is 2 hours, like,
I don't mind the length. It's just atypical for my pod.
Right. But it's on the fly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I so much prefer the Discord stuff because I can take a minute and I can start looking things up and then see if my argument is right. Because when it's on the fly, it's a little harder to do. But
for the most part, there are a few things we fundamentally agree to disagree on. But for the most part, I don't think our perspectives are actually all that off. We just come from different sides of it.
Yeah, no, I think we both agree that, like, the analytics and the field, it all has to work together. And whenever you go one way or another, if you go to Dusty Baker and Nafi Perez, it's not going to work.
Yep.
If you go straight to this guy is his top OBP goes at the top of the lineup, and then you just work down from there, that's not going to work either.
Yep.
Right? Like, all of this stuff has to work together, and the argument always seems to be it has to be one way or the other, and it's just not how it works. It's frustrating to see it, and then it's frustrating when it feels, I should say, because I don't know that it's happening, but it's frustrating when it feels as if it is being pushed one way or another, and there's not that intermingling of these things.
Mm-hmm. It's also hard to do the analysis from not only from the outside, but like even the beat writers only get so much access. But like, I don't know what the interactions are between Jed and Carter. I don't know what the interactions are between Jed and Carter and Counsell. We always had our theories on who was making the lineup when David Ross was there, and I think maybe it wasn't working the way I thought it was working last year. Like, there were a lot of things I was putting on Ross that, given things that Hoyer said after the season when he made the switch and things I've seen this year, I don't know that it was Ross. And
right, but then we see Canario getting 10 days in Chicago where he bats once, and you're like,
yeah,
wait, that seemed to be what Ross was doing, and then you get confused about it all again.
But then all of a sudden, like, Morel and Bush are getting playing time. So, and PCA kind of forced it because he's just. I like that phrase, chaos agent, I used the other day. Like, when he's out there doing his thing, he's just.
I want that to be a thing. Professional chaos agent, PCA. I mean,
yeah, he is just so much fun to watch, and sometimes he's going to do things that are just unbelievably stupid. And like, what the hell are you even thinking? But it's totally worth it for the other things he does. I mean,
and honestly, this team,
they need it.
And this team, like, PCA is the perfect guy for that. Mm-hmm. Morel is the perfect guy for that. They are your vibe guys.
Yep.
Shota is a vibe guy.
Do you remember
Assad, I think, is kind of a vibe guy.
Do you remember the triple PCA hit early in the season to left field in Wrigley when they measured him at like 11 seconds home to third? Who hits a triple to left in Wrigley without the left fielder even misplaying the ball? I mean, he probably didn't play with as much urgency as he should have, but he did not misplay anything.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing how quickly it is. And the Cubs just took a lead, by the way.
I'm not even tracking yet, but
The Cubs are playing the Giants, and
don't give too much away because I'm going to start watching it after. But
no, we were gonna talk
Yes.
about Willie Mays real quick.
Yep.
Let's end on Willie Mays because PCA is really in that Willie Mays sort of situation where when Willie came up, he couldn't hit.
Yeah,
he just absolutely couldn't hit. But
which is mind blowing a little bit, knowing what we know now. But
he's number 3 all time,
Yes.
or not anymore. Like I think he was number 3 all time forever.
Yeah.
Like in home runs.
Yep.
Like he is a monster. And yet, like when he started, he couldn't hit very well, but he could play the field so well at center field. They were just like, as long as you do that, you just keep going. And PCA is nobody's ever going to be Willie Mays. But that's the kind of thing. If you want PCA to ever have a chance to be Willie Mays, you got to let him play and just see what happens. Because if Willie Mays was in this environment, people would have been calling for his head if he wasn't hitting.
100%. And that's where I love the fact they just said, you know what, you're just going to go play center field every day. Everybody else is going to hit for you, and your battle will come around eventually. And that's what this.
And man, did it come around.
I mean, I look at again, not to spend too much time on the advanced metrics, but like you look at PCA's defensive metrics, and he's tied with guys that have played twice as much as he's played in like things stats that accumulate. Like it's unbelievable. And the balls he gets to, some balls I can watch him coast in, knowing that like Tauchman's probably sliding for that catch, or Bellinger's maybe diving for this one, and Pete's just floating in like it's nothing.
Oh, it's amazing. Like he could probably catch about 75% of every ball that goes to the outfield, and the corner outfielders could cover from like the 368 sign to the line. Like
you'll see him come in the picture like, okay, say I'll let you catch this one. That's fine. Or
he's just like, I'm here. I'm just thought I'd stop in, see how it's going. He's amazingly fast, and he could totally get to those balls.
Yes.
And it's so much fun to watch him. But again, it's like so many people will call for his head because he can't hit, and not that he can't hit, he just doesn't hit that well. Same with Morel gets that all the time too.
And he may never be
leads the team in RBI, which RBI is the worst thing in it. Well, you know what? RBI means scoring, and the guy that leads your team in getting runs on a team that can't score runs should probably play.
Again, like everything else, it's context, right? Like, I mean, where I don't like RBI is if a guy's basically never up with guys on, you're not going to get RBIs. And but use it in context. Like they still matter. I just don't want to hear this guy has 80 RBIs, therefore he's a good hitter. That may not necessarily be true. But when you look at everything else with Morel, I think he's going to be a good hitter. He's just got to work through the maturity at the plate and the approach and
right. See, yeah, and this is where we get into these conversations, because I don't know if it makes a person a good hitter. I personally think what you're saying, if a guy doesn't have a lot of RBI, doesn't mean that he's not a good hitter. But I think a guy that does have a lot of RBIs, it absolutely means he's a good hitter. Like, I don't care if he hits 128. If he can drive in 100 runs, hitting 128, then that's 100. Nobody's doing that.
Right. Well, and that's the difference.
Like it's more important than the batting average or the OBP or any of that crap if he can get those runs.
And while I agree with you on Morel's defense overall, I think he's going to be okay at third base. One big difference between Morel and PCA, although Morel does not play a premium position, PCA can be a league average hitter or maybe even a touch below, and he's going to have massive value overall because of his defense and his speed. At some point, if Morel does not get over the hump and stays a below average overall hitter, that's going to hurt his value overall because he doesn't.
See, but again, is he really a below average overall hitter? He's dropped his strikeout rate to below league average.
That's why I think he's going to be very good.
Above league average, and he's hitting 212 in a season where the league average is 240.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's like, I don't know, 2 hits a week.
Well,
to be league average.
But here's the thing, like the strike rate and the walk rate. He cut his strikeout rate from 31% to last I looked, he was around 22. And that's been holding for a while. Like I don't think that's going back up.
It's been all season. Yeah.
And his walk rate went from like 8.4 to he's up over 12. So that's a 50% jump. You don't do those things if you're not maturing as a hitter. So that tells me he may need more time to get to where he's not pulling every ground ball to third base. But that tells me he's putting in the work and is understanding what it is he has to do to get better. And those things are just going to be the next steps.
See, in the whole hitting thing, I think that just comes to bad coaching. What? Hit it hard and see what happens. Because guess what he does? He hits it hard and he sees what happens, and his BABIP is like 180. It's terrible.
Well, one thing I have...
But it's because I don't think anybody's trying to help him. Nobody's saying with 2 strikes, choke up, do something different. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel
except he is, though, because he's not striking out as much. He's not shortening up like Bellinger did, but he's making a change with 2 strikes. Otherwise, the strikeout rate would still be 30%.
But I think it's still the same swing. That's the problem. It's like the swing is the swing is the swing. It's Chris Bryant. It's the swing is the swing, and the only thing that changes is the pitch. And it's just like that's stupid.
The one thing I have seen when I dig into his hitting metrics is he gets a lot of balls where he either, I think it's basically timing, because he's either ahead of the pitch, pulling it, smashing it on the ground, or he hits a lot of balls 107 miles an hour, but he gets more like a 38 to 42 degree launch angle. So those are the flyouts to deep left. Like he's just under it. Like if he just gets that timing and get those hands where they need to be, which could be adjusting the swing. It could just be maturity and timing and knowing what pitch is coming. Right. But a lot of times he's not that far off.
No, he's not far off. And this is anecdotal, but it feels like about the time we found out he was the 6th fastest swinger in the league, he started to plummet a little bit in May.
I think it was coincidental, but we'll see.
He hit like 198 in May. And not that he was much better. He was only like 202. But, I don't know. He's at that point where he's almost a Kyle Schwarber situation, except for Kyle Schwarber had an even better eye.
Yeah, and Kyle Schwarber was also older and a little bit more polished at the plate, and Morel's still 24. So
yeah, give him a little bit more time.
But with this, right, it's been great having you on.
I'll let you go, even though I kept us going another 10 minutes.
That's awesome. I think you broke your record for longest CubsPS Plus podcast. So
absolutely, and the thing is, I could sit here and keep talking to you for like another hour. Like this is, I actually like talking to you because you have an actual point of view. You understand what you're talking about, and I can go back and forth. It's refreshing because so many times you get people who are just like, well, the bullpen was terrible last night, and you're like, they threw 5 innings where they didn't give up a run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they're terrible. It's like, well, okay, you clearly aren't watching.
They just want to say what they want to say. They don't want to listen to what anybody else has to say.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, it's been great having you on, and it was nice filling in for you last week on. It was interesting being a guest host on Sun Ranto. It's a whole different perspective, and you guys do a long show, so I have some newfound respect for the endurance it takes to stay focused for that long.
We do exactly what we did right here every week.
Yep. So hey, if you're not listening to Sun Ranto show, go check it out. But
and if you're listening to this show, it's probably too late to tell you to break it up into 2 bits.
Well, it's been great having you on,
cool.
And we'll do it again. And
great, yeah, we'll definitely talk again.
And
I'm into it.
Let's do it again. Where can people find you on social media?
Oh, I'm not really on social media.
Okay.
I've kind of like dropped off. I'm on Discord, and that's basically it. Unless I have to do something for Sun Ranto. So the Sun Ranto show at on Twitter.
Perfect.
It's the Ranto Show versus Ranto, which is Danny, but you can follow him too. Or you can follow IFG, Infield Fly Girl. She's over there on the Twitters. They would like to hear from you, and that's the only way I see any of that stuff.
Awesome. Well, great having you on, and we'll do it again.
Cool. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining us today. If you liked the episode, please drop a rating and review wherever it is you get your podcasts, and share an episode with a friend. Just a few seconds from you gives me great feedback and helps other Cub fans find the show. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube, all at CubsPS+. And check out the Patreon page, patreon.com/CubsPS+, to help support the show. As always, the theme music for this podcast is Prospect Park West by Jerry McCoy. This is Mike Waller, host of the CubsPS+ podcast. Every day with Cubs baseball or talking about Cubs baseball is a great day. Go Cubs!